What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Total Human Optimization Podcast. I'm really excited today because we have one of the most badass bodybuilding lifting dudes in the entire world, Mr. Mark Bell. Welcome to the show, Mark.
What's up, everybody? It's a little bit more of a powerlifting background. I try not to take any credit for bodybuilding because I think that bodybuilding is...
To be fair, the look, you got the look.
Yeah. Going for the jacked and tan look.
Still jacked and tan.
But the bodybuilders that I know like Dexter Jackson, some of these high-level bodybuilders, and Charles Glass, who's a world-famous bodybuilding coach, the pain and the agony that those guys go through and the dieting and stuff is something that I want no part of. So whenever somebody says, do you do some bodybuilding, I try to say, not really.
But the part about being in your underwear on stage, you're cool with that, right?
Oh, I'm always in my underwear, just not on a stage. But yeah, bodybuilding is amazing. I do think that people should be a little bit more cautious when they use that word. You know, it's kind of akin to just saying like that you're a fighter and you're comparing yourself to like guys in the UFC. It's like, well, there's kind of some different stages to it. You know, there's some different levels to it all, you know?
Right on. So before you kill me because I said the word bodybuilder, take me back before, you really got back and got into the whole lifting thing. I read you started lifting at like 11 years old. Is that right?
Yeah, I started really young. There's kind of multiple layers to the whole thing, but the two layers that are quick and easy to talk about are I was playing football, throwing the football around with myself. I had two older brothers, and they never cared to play with me because they were 4 and 6 years older than me. And so it was usually just me, just playing with myself, quote unquote.
Yeah, see, you were doing weights, and I was literally playing with myself.
That's right.
So that's why I look the way I look today, and that's why you look the way you look today.
Well, I was playing with myself too a lot, almost to the point where I went blind. But anyway, this one occasion, I'm just throwing a football up in the air to myself, and a friend of the family, I guess you'd call him. We always thought he was an asshole, so he wasn't really a friend. He was like, "Hey, Bell, throw me the football." And I should have known better. He was a little bit older. So I throw him my football, my favorite Jets football, had it all broken in, just perfect and everything. I would go everywhere, but I'd sleep with the damn thing, you know? And so I throw him the ball, and he catches it, and then he turns and just kicks it as far as he could. And he kicked it into the woods. And the motherfucker's name is Joe Garlop. And Joe, when you get out of,
wherever
Joe.
you are.
Oh, I know where he is. He's in jail probably, yeah. Joe, whenever you get out of jail.
He's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, he kicked the football in the woods, and I could never find it. Like, it disappeared. It went into the fucking Bermuda Triangle somehow or something like that, and it was gone forever. So that moment, I was a chubby little kid, you know? I was kind of big, but I was just fat. I wasn't like, didn't know anything about training and stuff. I'm 11 years old, 12 years old. And, from that scene, from that day, you can cut to like a Rocky montage. And there I was, like hitting a heavy bag in my garage and using some of the weights. The other side of the story is that my brother, Chris, was born with shitty hips and shitty knees. And so he had knee surgeries when he was young. And he was on like crutches and all these different things. The first doctor that he went to, the first chiropractor that he went to happened to be a power lifter. And it was a guy in New York named Tom Starace. And Dr. Tom, we called him, was fucking jacked. He had like veins running through his legs and shit. And we were like, what the hell is this guy all about? You know? And he told my brother, he said, the only way you're ever going to not be in pain is to be strong. So I'm going to teach you how to squat. And he started teaching my brother how to squat with just a broomstick on his back in his office. And then my brother went on probably about 2 years later to squat 675 while he was in high school at 220 pounds.
Yeah, so that's a big difference from today, because today, now kids can just go online and read probably some bad advice here and there.
Mm-hmm.
But, back then you had to like learn from somebody you know.
Yeah, it's way different now, and I don't want to kill the online coaching thing too much, but I don't really believe that there is such a thing. I think that you might be programming for somebody. You might be giving them a workout, but I don't believe that there's really online coaching, because I don't think you can coach somebody that directly unless you're there coaching them.
Yeah, and you're not going to teach everything you need to know in an Instagram video.
Yeah, right. And it's, even just getting feedback and watching video of somebody lift is so much different than actually being there and watching them lift. If you watch a video, you're not seeing all the little nuances, the trembling and the different things that might happen with a big squat. and you're not going to be able to pick up on everything that you need. So it is great that it exists, and it's great that more and more people are getting into fitness, more and more people are getting into powerlifting. I'm really grateful for that. I think it's awesome. But at the same time, if you have somebody that you can learn from that's closer to you, I would recommend that. I think that that's a better option.
John?
Yeah, so that was your introduction to the powerlifting scene. I'd really be interested to know what kind of programming you used back then. This is like late 80s we're talking about? Are we talking like old school linear periodization, Ed Cohen style training? Can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, it was basically just, you add weight each week. But you always started from a place where you knew you could make the lifts. The lifts were, even to a point, especially for me because I was so young, the lifts were pretty easy. So you might start with a higher rep range the further out you are from a competition, and then the rep ranges would go lower as the competition came closer. Now,
like a 12-week cycle? Is that what you
Yeah,
use?
it would be like a 12-week cycle. And then a lot of traditional stuff too, 5 sets of 5, 3 sets of 3. Was it Bill Pearl back in the day with his 5 sets of 5 training? Anyway, yeah, we did a lot of that kind of stuff, and just manipulation of the sets and the reps as you got closer to the competition. And it's a lot of what you see now, like Westside Barbell came in and stirred things up quite a bit, and you had a lot of different types of training going on. Obviously, CrossFit has made a huge splash as well. They pretty much adopted a similar system, the Westside, where it's constantly varied, the conjugate system, doing something different each time you work out. And then I think a lot of people, when they started to, the Westside Barbell program is so niche because it was developed by Louis Simmons, and Louis Simmons is a powerlifting guru, powerlifting coach with a bunch of powerlifters that train under his tutelage. Now, some of the issues start to pop up where you have the guys are wearing powerlifting gear, and then plus they're taking anabolic steroids, and the combination of those things makes their training at least a little different. I think we can all agree that the training and some of the results are going to be, at the very least, a little different. My main thing with some of that is when it comes to powerlifting gear, the training, because I've done it, I've squatted 1,080, benched 854, and deadlifted 766, so I know quite a bit about it. The training is so different, and so Westside Barbell is perfect for powerlifters that are wearing powerlifting gear, and it can be really effective for people that aren't wearing it. There's tons and tons of great benefits to a lot of the stuff in the Westside Barbell program, but just like any other program, there's a lot of holes in it as well. There's an old saying, and it kind of sucks, but the best program is the one you're currently not doing. So if you're doing high reps, then you're losing some of your strength, and if you're doing low reps, then you're losing some of your conditioning. And so basically, in a nutshell, we're all pretty much screwed. But when it comes to that, the West Side stuff, I think that like I said, there's a lot of good that comes of it. The main hole in it, in my opinion, is just the volume. There's a lot of times there's going to be a lack of volume because those max effort days, if somebody can only deadlift 315 and they deadlift 135 for the day, 225 for the day, 275, and then they barely make 315, what did they really do for the day? They didn't really do that much. Now, on the other hand, if somebody deadlifts 715, then they would have a nice body of work, and they could probably move on to their assistance exercises, and that program would work well for them.
So what you're saying is, for people who don't know, you're describing the max effort day, right? So what people would do is you work up to a certain rep max for that day, and if you're young and relatively weak, it's not going to take you that long to hit that number, so you're not getting a lot of workup sets that builds the volume that drives the growth and strength gains you need. So how would you modify that program for less experienced people?
You would have to, and Louis Simmons, he says this all the time, but no, just people aren't always listening. So he knows where there's the gaps, and he tries to fill in those gaps for people. But again, let's use the bench press, for example. Let's say you bench 185 pounds. You might bench the bar a couple times, 95 pounds, 135. Maybe you do 175, and then you do the 185, right? On a max effort day, you're going as heavy as you can. And that's pretty much your bench pressing for that day. Now, the problem, again, is with somebody that has that strength level, beginner strength level like that, unless it's maybe a female, but a beginner strength level.
I think you just mentioned my max and then said beginner.
I'm not being offensive. I said beginner. I just said you're
and then you threw female on top of it.
It just keeps getting more depressing, doesn't it? But basically, yeah, there's not enough work there. Like when I was in school, and when you're doing math, they'd say, show me your work. Like, how'd you get to your result? How'd you get to that answer? And same thing with lifting. It's like, show me what you did. And if you only did like 2 sets, it's usually not enough. Now, if it's 2 sets and it's at a maximum, it can be enough sometimes, but it can't be enough all the time. You're going to have to get different work. And so for somebody to progress on a bench press who's not proficient at bench pressing already, they're going to have to do a lot of other exercises other than just actually bench pressing. And that variation can be huge. They could still stay on the bench maybe, but maybe they do close grip. Maybe they do wide grip. Maybe they do pauses. Maybe they pause in multiple spots. So it's like the variations start to become great. It's just that you're going to need a handful of them to fill in the amount of work that you've missed by not being quite strong enough to really get the work necessary from the main movement. So, you know, it's called a main movement. And I have a friend of mine, Stan Efferding, who was really frustrated that he said all the movements should be main, like, because we need to squeeze the most out of every exercise that we do. So somebody that's weaker, that's trying to follow the West Side program or even 5-3-1, they would just have to be diligent with getting 4 or 5 other exercises in after that first movement was completed.
So you do your bench press, and then it's wise to do incline, dumbbell, shoulder press, something like that, a couple follow-up assistance moves?
Yeah, and to go a little further into it, anybody I know that's worth a shit in powerlifting or even bodybuilding, they all overtrain. They all overdo it. Like, oh, you can't do it. It doesn't work that way. And they, time and time again, you see people that are like, oh, I benched every day until, you know, from the time I was 14 until I was 19. And then they benched 500 pounds or some shit. So, you know, overtraining can lead to injuries. It can lead to a lot of problems. But for those motherfuckers that are tough enough to survive it, then they come out the other end stronger. And you're going to see guys that have a big bench press or guys that have a big squat, they usually have big legs or big arms, right, to go along with whatever lift they're good at. And the only way to get that way is to kind of overdo it.
Yeah, so recovery is a huge thing these days. Now, I don't know if back then people were just not paying attention to it, or maybe it just wasn't a highlight or a headline. But it's different now, right? I mean, there's a lot of different tools that you can use, and people are really paying attention to it more.
Recovery is a scam, I think, in a lot of ways. And the reason why I say it that way is because people are being sold a bill of goods that's just not 100% true. You do need to recover from your workouts, but hey, how about we do this? How about we drink more water? How about we get more sleep? And how about we don't train like a bunch of idiots? If your training's intact and you have a good program, then you shouldn't have to worry about your recovery quite as much. It's still always going to be important. Now, if we're going outside of powerlifting, then we're talking about a whole nother animal. If we're talking about professional sports, then you have to really start to apply all means of recovery. Powerlifting is just such a stationary sport. Like you're not really moving anywhere. And the whole idea is to conserve energy and to get as big as possible. So powerlifting is like in its own weird category. Bodybuilding, the goal is similar. You're trying to lift big, you're trying to eat big, and you're trying to rest big. You know, they're trying to get as much as they can out of a training session without overdoing it. Maybe 90 minutes or so, and getting in and out of that gym. We got a nice bird in here.
Loud
Yeah,
bird.
it's pretty loud.
But you know, those types of sports are different than pro basketball, or if you're in the UFC, like I don't even know where you'd begin, just because like the amount of recovery you'd need, because you're boxing, you're doing jiu-jitsu, you're wrestling, you're doing 90 different things. Plus you got to lift, you got to have conditioning work. I mean, it just goes on and on.
Yeah, so let's get like a little further in detail of what you're talking about as recovery. Are you talking about not doing anything at all? Are you talking about foam rolling? Are you talking?
Yeah, what are the aspects of recovery you think are overblown?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think, you know, just I just think everyone's a little bit of a baby about it, you know, like everyone wants to go in these float tanks and float, and everybody wants to go into these really freezing cold chambers and stuff. And I
Too on it original.
You're listening, Joe? You paying attention?
Oh man.
You know what? Look, if you believe it in your brain, then it's true, right? Like, let's just start with that.
Yeah, because if you feel good, that's half the
If
battle.
you feel
in a
good,
day.
then I can't sit here and tell you otherwise. But the issue is always this: is that turmeric, right? Hot new thing. Everyone's going crazy about it. Where's it going to be in 3 years? It's not going to be anywhere.
Still on the shelf.
Yeah, there's going to be something else that's going to come along. And turmeric's been around forever too. So it's not like it didn't work before. It's not like it all of a sudden started to work more. But there's a study to promote and a study to refute every single thing that's ever happened, pretty much. And so,
I mean, butter's come and gone.
yeah,
Eggs have come and gone. It changes every time.
yeah, and we end up confused and fat and unhealthy and injured and everything else. And it's the answer almost always come back somewhere in the middle. It starts to swing back in the middle. I'm a huge fan of the ketogenic diet. I love it. But it's for myself that I love it. And I don't, I'll promote it to other people. I'll talk to other people about it because I call it the fat guy diet, because when you're heavy, you tend to have some really crazy addictions to sugar. And, guys that are big, they're going to love to eat, ice cream and all these different things. Different people have different things they like, but you're going to be kind of addicted to food, I guess, is my main point. And when you get to eat bacon and when you get to eat sausage and you get to have steak and some of these other things, it helps pull some of that other stuff away. It helps get rid of some of those urges. So for me, it's the only diet I've ever been able to really follow for a long period of time, while getting results towards losing weight, and also and your calories still always count. They still always matter. I'm not too much of a calories in, calories out person. I don't count them. But I do think that they definitely play a role. Like, I'm looking at the amount of food that I eat, I weigh myself, and I go from there.
Would you modify the keto diet for powerlifting or serious strength trainers? Because a lot of people would argue you're just not going to get enough carbs to recover or have the energy in the gym.
Yeah. The key as a coach is to know that you might know some things that help people, but you also don't know anything. And you have to take the feedback that you get from people. So if you're working with somebody and you're saying, hey, this is what I think you should do, and they tried it for a week and they said, hey, it's not working. And you say, okay, well, let's try it another week. Let's tweak this. Let's tweak that. They try it for 2-3 weeks. They're still not feeling great from it. Then you have to understand that maybe there's a possibility that their body works differently than yours does. And you're going to have to work on giving them the new information. For me, when it comes to something like that, it would be as simple as, okay, well, let's try to have you have 30 carbs or so, 25 to 35 carbs before a training session. Let's see how you start to feel with that. Now you're getting some distance away from the original concept of the ketogenic diet. But if the person trains really hard 3 times a week, maybe they train 4 or 5 times a week, but they got 3 hard days, then you would just apply those carbohydrates to those 3 days, and you would kind of go from there and kind of see how that works.
You're talking about like a piece of fruit before a workout, or?
Yeah. It could be something as simple as that. It could be, I like cereal, so like sometimes I'll have
Go-Go Puffs.
Yeah, Go-Go Puffs. Yeah, you saw the post.
Tricks, man. Kids.
And so sometimes it's like, why not have a little fun with it? I'm playing a long game. I'm in it for the long haul. I've been doing it since I was 12. I'm 40 now. I'm in it for the long haul when it comes to the business, or when it comes to the diet, or when it comes to any of it. So I don't think it's a huge deal if you have a donut on a particular day. Like, as long as you can justify. It's always good to try to justify and make sense of things. How is this going to help me? Something I talk about in seminars quite a bit is you spent the whole day following your diet. At some point you had a conversation with yourself. You got that inner monologue going saying, dude, you're too fucking fat. Summer's coming. We got to strip down on the beach. We got to get on stage in our bikini or whatever the choice is, or it's a wedding and you got to take photos, or whatever the case is, and you want to just look better and feel better and so on. You had a conversation with yourself that was healthy, that was good, and you committed to you're like, okay, we're going to go forward with this fucking plan. And then, it's 8:00 at night. You ate dinner at 5:30, and now like the leftover pizza your kids ate is just staring you right in the face. Or you have leftover ice cream from a few weeks ago, or whatever the case is. And so that's where it's like, how does this help me? How does it make any sense to put a lot of effort into the entire day where you worked out? Working out, like it might take an hour, sometimes it might take 2 hours, but the whole process of it is a much longer thing. It's like a 4-hour ordeal. The more you get into it, the worse it gets, but it's a thing the preparation to go to the gym. You got, you know, certain clothes, certain shoes, certain this, certain that. Maybe you have supplements, pre-workouts and post-workouts, and like you just got all this prep going into it. You got a meal planned a lot of times before, because you don't want to eat something that's going to mess up your stomach while you're it's a whole thing, right? It's a whole process. So you agree with yourself. You're like, we're making this fucking pact and we're doing this and we're going to go out 100%. And then you throw away the whole day, you know, at the end of the night by just eating some junk. So if you think about it in those terms, it's like, it doesn't make sense, but there's always that, every day is a fight, and it's not a fight against other people the way I think most people think it is. A fight against yourself.
Yeah. So why do you think most people fall off? I mean, is it bad planning? Is it just lack of willpower?
It's definitely a lack of willpower. However, there are, I think there's definitely a possibility that the pulses that you have, the urges that some people have towards certain foods, I think is maybe just as strong as drugs. And so we have a lot of compassion when it comes to drugs, right? Somebody's addicted to heroin. You're like, man, that's fucking here. What happened to so-and-so? Like, sucks he's in that spot. Now he goes to rehab. Well, when you're fat, it's like, you know, where do you go? Where do you turn? And you consistently feel like a failure because you are making these decisions. You are thinking about these things consciously. And then now you're going back against the grain. You're going back against your own will, going back against what you just said. But the pulses are too strong sometimes. I think something to keep in mind is that those pulses don't last very long. They literally last a few seconds. And if you can replace the food that you're thinking about with something different, whether it be an activity or a certain type of food, I was just sharing with my friend earlier today, like you can pick a food that's kind of gross, and you can have an unlimited amount of that food. Like, let's just take something like a cottage cheese or something like that, or like just plain yogurt. Like I actually learned to like the taste of plain yogurt, but most people don't dig it. But if you have something like that where it's the caloric intake's not going to be, you know, through the roof, it's something to replace what you originally wanted. You're not going to be able to meet yourself halfway. I think that's the important thing to know. The pulse the urges that you get, they last 5-10 seconds, and they need to be replaced with something else. And then also, you're not going to be able to be like, I'll just have one scoop. You know, like that's not going to work. Not for somebody who's been addicted to food for such a long time.
That's a great tip. And can you give us any more advice on how to weather those 10 seconds? Like, I've heard people say, like, when you get a food craving, you should just leave the room, drop down, and do 10 push-ups. And it sort of clears your mind and resets you, and you don't have the craving.
Dude. That's the way to do it.
Well, we're talking about food here.
That actually is the first thing that popped in my head. I've actually heard that.
It's the only thing that'll make me not stop.
See, I need a little more time though. It's
like quick, just shove your thumb up your ass. Like just something random. It's totally different. I gotta set
the mood first.
Yeah, you know, some other tips would be, you know, to try to follow some rules. Try to have some steadfast rules. Put the information out there in the universe and let people know what you're trying to do. Because then you're accountable. So if you keep telling him, man, I'm not going to have a beer until the 4th of July, you know, and then, you know, he sees you out somewhere and now you're fucking up, you know, now you're accountable. So that would be rule number 1. That would be the first thing I would do, is just tell other people what you're trying to do. Especially the people in your household, because they're the ones that are going to actually see you, your wife, your kids, people that are close to you, maybe coworkers and stuff. And that way they're going to see you, and you're going to bring your meals to workplace and stuff like that. So that would help a ton. The other thing that I think is really important is to try to eliminate like where the bad habits are. Where do these habits come into play? Most people seem to deal with breakfast pretty well. They either just like don't eat it, or they eat something relatively healthy, because the egg option is like, you can manipulate it. You can go egg whites or just whole eggs, depending on your diet and your preference and stuff like that. Lunchtime seems to be pretty tough for people, and then dinner sometimes seems to be pretty tough for people. So like what's the hardest part of the day? You know, is like 3 o'clock really a tough time for people because they're at work and they're hungry and they're just thinking about food, and then they're so hungry they make a bad choice. So the second thing I would say, other than telling other people, would be to not really allow yourself to get too hungry. Because when you get too hungry, you start to lose your mind. Now, the flip side to that, which is total opposite of what I just said, and getting hungry, would be something like intermittent fasting. Like if you can't control yourself and you don't know what the fuck to do, then just don't eat. And basically, intermittent fasting is where you're going to just try to take your calories that you're allotted for the day, and you're going to stuff them into a time frame of 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, like whatever you deem necessary. But sometimes people need extremes like that to be able to try to control their caloric intake. I guess another thing you can kind of throw in there, and this isn't the best, but there are a lot of options. There's a lot of snacks, there's protein bars, there's things like that. I just think when it comes to that stuff, you can kind of overdo it. It can also be like a gateway and a trigger into just this. The more strict you can stay on your diet, the better. You can also, as I mentioned a little earlier, have like, something like that's kind of unlimited, like vegetables or something like that,
Yeah. So going back to intermittent fasting, because I think out of everything that I've ever tried or tried a plan wise, that's been my favorite that I've ever had.
Yeah.
And not just because of the benefits that come with weight control and stuff like that, but digestion. I've never had better digestion than when I was on intermittent fasting.
When people first started talking about intermittent fasting, I was like, this is such bullshit. This is like, just don't eat. I'm like, this is fucking dumb. What are people talking about? And then I started hearing more and more feedback, and people were actually really liking it. And I was like, man, this isn't really making any sense. People were talking about how they think more clearly, they digest food better. And I was like, well, maybe it's something I should play around with. So I've used it before for myself. I actually had a little opposite reaction, but I haven't done it that much, to be 100% honest. Where because I didn't eat for the day, then when it was time to eat, it was like my stomach was like, what are we doing here? And so a couple times it didn't sit well with me, but I think it whatever you can follow, and then also too, what's wrong with switching around your diet from time to time? Like a ketogenic diet is great, but so are just traditional bodybuilding diets where the fat is low, the carbs are high, the protein's high. Why not switch things up a little bit? Why not go from one diet to another diet? The bodybuilding diet would be something that you're doing to resurrect your metabolism, basically, something to kick your metabolism into high gear, because the more muscle you have, the more your body's going to work for you rather than you being a slave to your body. The ketogenic diet, a lot of times for many people, will help strip some body fat off you. Intermittent fasting is great to utilize, but do you need to utilize it every single day? I know, like, Rogan and Rob Wolf had a discussion about it, and Rob Wolf's like, I do it here and there. I'll do it 2-3 days a week. Certain days he has his jujitsu. He's like, I feel tired when I do jujitsu, so I eat carbs. And he also eats some things that are off his normal schedule, like peanut butter, even though he talks in his book about not eating peanut butter. So it's like at some point, conventional wisdom needs to kind of kick in, and you have to figure out your own recipe for your own self. But I do think that it makes the most sense. I'm actually in the middle of writing a book called Jacked and Tan. I wrote an article for you guys the other day, Jacked and Tan. And in the Jacked and Tan book, there's 4 different diets, and I talk about utilizing all of them. Why not go from one to the other? The ketogenic diet, you could do it for a long time, and people have had good blood readings and good markers for success with their health by doing it for a long period of time. But also too, I don't know how much sense it makes to do it all the time. And so for me, I go from that. Once I strip the body fat, then I start to bring the carbs back in a little bit. And that's exactly what I'm doing now. And I made a post the other day about being in phase 2. I just made it up, and then everyone's like, what's phase 2?